Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Lianas Senior Transition Support, specialists in downsizing and seniors residences.
Welcome back to Life Unrehearsed. My name is Matt Delvecchio, specializing in life transitions, downsizing in the senior living industry.
And I'm Corrie, clinical social worker and psychotherapist, specializing in grief and loss. Matt, do you ever think about retirement?
We're both similar ages, and I do think about retirement. But it is immediately followed by, how am I going to retire?
What does that even mean? And I get it's such an interesting, especially for us at the ages that we are, such an interesting topic, which is why I'm thrilled that we have Mike Drak and Susan Williams on the line. The two are the co-authors of Retirement, Heaven or Hell, Which Will You Choose? 9 Principles for Deciding Your Ideal Post-Career. Mike is a 40-year veteran of the financial services sector. Mike found himself thrown into retirement unexpectedly and personally suffered what he calls retirement shock. Can't wait to hear more about that. While working through this major life change, he authored his first book, Victory Lap Retirement, to help people recognize the value of their time in retirement. Retirement Haven, Heaven or Hell is a follow-up to this book, and it helps people understand the opportunities of retirement and design their best life. Well, I'm all in for that. Susan Williams is the founder of Booming Encore, a digital media hub designed to provide baby boomers with information and inspiration to help them live their best encore. Booming Encore is recognized as one of the top websites in the world for baby boomers, as well as being a global authority and social media influencer for baby boomers, aging, and retirement. Welcome to Life Unrehearsed, Susan and Mike.
Thanks so much for having us.
So, Mike, I want to hear everything, but Mike, we're going to start with you. Why'd you write the book?
To save my soul. I tell you what happened is, when I was forced into retirement, I struggled. I failed at it. I made all the classic mistakes, and I ended up in a place I call retirement hell. And I started to work on trying to figure things out, and I started using the journal to write my ideas down and what I thought I should do and how could I design a great retirement lifestyle for myself. And the journal turned into a book, and it served as my own guide, how to get out of retirement hell. And I thought, well, I struggled so hard, and I know so many other people are going to struggle just like I did. So why not write a book and work with Susan and dangers of falling unprepared in retirement and creating awareness and educating them about the non-financial challenges they'll be facing, and there's a lot of them.
And we're going to be expanding on those for sure. Now, Susan, we're going to throw it over to you. Typically, the way it works, you work your whole career and then you retire, full stop. But do you think the traditional full stop retirement is a thing of the past?
Absolutely, and this is the reason why, Matt. Traditional retirement was based on, being a very short period of time, and now with longevity, retirement can actually last, between 20 to 30 years. And so to actually finance this, first of all, is going to be very difficult, as well as you can't just go on a vacation. Like a lot of the marketing materials are, you retire and you're going to go live on a boat or you're going to, go to the beach. But, 20 to 30 years, that's just not going to sustain you. You really need to have something that's going to keep us engaged, something that's going to keep us socially connected, something that's going to make us want to get up and going for the day, whether that be, work for pay or volunteer work or helping organizations or doing something. And that's why we're advocating that traditional retirement is definitely a thing of the past. It was built for a longevity model that has definitely shifted, and that's why we're strongly suggesting that people really take a look at this extra time that they're giving and how they want to actually spend their time.
That's Susan Williams along with Mike Drak, who are co-authors of Retirement, Heaven and Hell. You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Corrie with my co-host Matt Delvecchio, and I want to put out a question for one or both of you. Why do you think so many people struggle with the retirement transition?
Mike, do you want to start that one?
Sure. I believe they're set up for failure by the advertisers, along with the financial services industry, because they keep selling us the same image of retirement that is going to be based on 100% leisure And retirement isn't like that anymore. And 100% leisure, playing golf all day or spending all your time on a beach somewhere isn't going to cut it for you. It's just not going to work like that. Our retirement's far different from what it was like for our parents and grandparents.
Yeah, and just to kind of expand on that, as Mike said, like the role models that we had for retirement were our parents or our grandparents, and they're not necessarily reflecting the new reality of a new retirement model and the new opportunity of this longevity. So in some ways, this is really uncharted territory that I think this generation is really starting to carve out.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you brought up a good point, Corrie. As you know, in my world, I'm dealing with a lot of seniors, and then they're up in their 80s and 90s. They've been retired for 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
It's a different world. People are living longer as well, so it has to be taken into consideration. Now, in your book, such a great book, you talk about, in fact, 9 principles for designing your ideal post-career. What would some of those most important retirement principles that we could all benefit from? Mike, I'm going to start with you.
Oh, sorry, you must have cut out just a second there. The 9 retirement principles are principles I put together that would help me live better longer. They're almost like longevity principles, and there's the things that I incorporate into my daily lifestyle, so I make sure I'm doing the things that make me happy. Because happy people live longer. That's the bottom line there.
We know. Actually, the research does suggest that. Can you give us an example of a couple of those principles?
Well, some of the principles are the importance of having strong relationships with family and friends. And we learned that from the pandemic. Mm-hmm. When people were forced to self-isolate, how bad that made us feel. And we know that people that have strong relationships are healthier and will live longer than others. So it's so important. Another principle is having a good sense of purpose in retirement, because we know people with a strong sense of purpose have lower mortality rates. But it's a challenge for some people to find a good source of purpose in retirement, and the importance of having a good attitude towards retirement. People with a good attitude live 7.5 years longer than not. If you think retirement is going to be terrible, well, guess what? It will be. But if you view it as a positive thing, if you're looking at the possibilities and you're working towards them, retirement could be the best time of your life, and it should be.
You're bringing up some very important ones. I love the social aspect. How many times have we heard the entrepreneur, the businessman who's retired and just he spent his life 24/7 working and has a real tough time. And the sense of purpose, Mike, I really like. I'm on the board of Nova West Island here. We have over 400 volunteers, and all these volunteers, they do have that sense of purpose. So you're bringing up some very good points. Talking with Mike Drak and Susan Williams here. They are 2 of the co-authors of Retirement Heaven or Hell. Which will you choose? And Susan, can you follow up quickly with a couple more of the retirement principles that you're promoting?
Certainly. Of course, staying mentally active and physically active is absolutely critical. These are the things that are going to allow you to continue to do the things that you want to do. So basically the principles are covering all the things that encourage us to be physically active, mentally stimulated, staying emotionally engaged. And also there's a financial aspect as well. And Mike even touches on the spiritual and to a certain degree, not that we get very deep into it, but just having a larger sense that you're part of something bigger and helps you also stay connected. So those are sort of the key principles. And a lot of that is actually reflected through the content that we actually have on Booming Encore as well.
Yeah, no, so interesting, and you're bringing up some very, very good points. We have to head out to traffic here, and we want to expand on some of this dialogue. But I think, Corrie, you and I spoke like this at the beginning. We're kind of joking in jest. We're looking at retirement. We're both in our mid-50s, full disclosure. Corrie's a heck of a lot better looking than mid-50s, let me tell you, than I am. However, in the back of our mind, I know we're like most people, and there's a bit of anxiety and fear about retirement. Am I going to have enough money? Are we going to be able to do it? And so that's what we want to talk a little bit more after traffic in terms of with Mike and Susan. What do you think some of the people's biggest retirement fears are? But first, we have to head out to the CJAD Traffic Center for a traffic update.
Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Lianas Senior Transition Support, specialists in downsizing and seniors residences.
Welcome back. You're listening to Life Unrehearsed. I'm Corrie Sirota, along with my co-host, Matt Del Vecchio, and we are talking about Creating Your Ideal Post-Career with Mike Drak and Susan Williams, co-authors of Retirement, Heaven or Hell. So I suspect that there are a lot of people like me out there that the idea of retirement is an interesting and provocative one. On the other hand, we're scared to death. So could you talk a little bit about what the biggest retirement fear is?
Sure, I'll take this one, Mike. First and foremost, the one that keeps coming up to the top, and I think, Marco, you kind of alluded to it before the break, is the fear of running out of money. And that kind of ties back into the whole fact that longevity, I mean, people are definitely living longer, but it also ties back to the fact that they haven't necessarily planned very well the non-financial aspects of their retirement and laid that out to figure out exactly what they're going to need in their retirement. They haven't necessarily thought about whether they're going to, have another source of income. Are they going to possibly start a business? Are they going to, work part-time, and build that sort of into their planning? And so I think that ties back to, yes, it's about retirement is definitely about planning financially, but that's why we wrote this book, is that it's also about the non-financial aspects and making sure you understand what you want to do so that you can then fund it, so that you can then really have the retirement that you really want. So that was the first and the top one that seems to come up all the time. Second one is also interesting, and it's an unexpected health event. So that really ties back to, our health, and are we going to be able to do the things that we want to do? So even after we planned it, are we going to be healthy enough to be able to actually do all that activities and those things that we really want to do with this extra time that we've been given? And so, that's often the second one, which is our health. And it's a shame sometimes that it takes us this long to actually start to recognize and value it, rather than, we should have been working on this quite a long time ago. You don't get old overnight, you get old over time, so to speak.
True.
Mm-hmm. Mike, in your introduction, you were talking about your retirement shock, I guess, when you found yourself unexpectedly into retirement. And you brought up a very good point on some of the principles, and I'd like to expand on one of them, which I think to me is so important, and that's about finding purpose in retirement. And why is that so important?
Well, everyone needs a good reason to get out of bed in the morning. And even in retirement, you need one. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, when we were going to school, we had purpose. Our purpose was to get good grades so we could get a good job and make some good money. And then later on, when we're working and we get married and we start a family, our purpose is to, maintain a good job and hopefully keep it, and provide support for our family. So we had big purpose, all the way up. But when we retire, we lose that source of purpose, and we need to find a good way of replacing that, or we're not going to be happy. We're going to drift, and we won't know what to do, and we're going to get bored, and we're going to get frustrated, especially if you're a growth-oriented retiree like I am.
I hear you so loud and clear, because as you've heard, I'm a grief, loss, and bereavement counselor, and I see people all the time, if their life was focused around the deceased, they lose purpose. And so we're having this similar discussions for different reasons. And I appreciate what you're saying. This is Mike Drak and Susan Williams, co-authors of Retirement, Heaven or Hell. And they're talking to us on Life Unrehearsed. I'm Corrie Sirota with my co-host Matt Del Vecchio. So one of the things I believe you advocate is working in retirement, that being really important. Can you expand on that?
Certainly. I think too often we label work as like a negative thing. Like there's an old saying, sort of, that's why we call it work, not play. Mm-hmm. But when you actually look at the definition of work, it's defined as an activity involving mental or physical effort done in order to achieve a purpose or result. So tying back to what Mike was talking about, purpose, work, whether it's paid or not, is really something that's done to help fuel that purpose and your contribution to society. And that's really important, because there's a lot of research out there that's, around purpose, around work, and the fact that if you do stay engaged, you actually live a healthier and longer life. It gives you a good reason to get up and out. It helps you stay socially connected. It keeps your brain sharp and keeps you learning new things. And it can also potentially provide you an additional source of income, which is often very nice to have as well. So that's why, we believe working in retirement is so important. And it's not about necessarily the pay or the work that you think you have to do. It's about the work that you want to do, and that's what we really try to support and push.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, Susan, especially like we were talking before. If you're going to be retired, it's no longer retired for 5-10 years. You might be retired for 20-30 years, and maybe having some supplemental income will help out. And others, and like you mentioned, working could be volunteer. We had a situation just today with our neighbors where the gentleman had to go to the hospital for a specialist, and a volunteer driver came, pulled up in the front driveway, nice gentleman, I think he was late 70s, and drove him to downtown and back. Took up about 3 hours of his time, but talk about the sense of purpose and working. It's really gratifying for him to help out. Now, we're going to wrap up quite soon, but throughout the book, you reference many lessons from the pandemic that could actually apply to retirement. Love that concept. And so why do you do this? I'm so interested to hear about it.
Having been through retirement shock and been the retirement hell, it was funny that there were many parallels that I could see in the pandemic, and the feelings were the same. When I was suffering from retirement shock, I felt lonely. I was all by myself. No one could relate to what I was going through. I had no one to talk to. And it was similar to the isolation I experienced during the pandemic. When we're not close to family or friends and we couldn't hug them and talk to them, it felt the same thing to me. It's almost like pandemic shock and retirement shock are the same. The only difference being that there is a vaccine for pandemic shock, but there isn't one for retirement shock. One other thing that really stood out for me was when restraints were lifted in different parts of the world, divorce rates shot up. And it's because people had a hard time adapting to the increased togetherness. And the same thing happens in retirement. When both people retire, they no longer have to go to work. They're spending a lot of time at home together, and they have a hard time adjusting to it. And we see, they even gave it a name, gray divorce. And divorce rates for retirees are going through the roof. And so to me, that was very important to understand the parallels and how they worked independently. And I said, wow, it's one and the same. And we have to be very careful here.
Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. We're running out of time here, but we want to thank both of you, Susan Williams and Mike Drak. Thank you for taking some time. Great advice for those that are either in retirement or soon considering it. So thank you for those great words of advice.
Well, thanks so much for having us. We really appreciate it, Matt and Corrie.
All right.
Thank you.
Mike Drak and Susan Williams. They are two of the co-authors of Retirement, Heaven or Hell. Which will you choose? Great book. Go get yourself a copy. And thanks for tuning in to Life Unrehearsed. As a reminder, for all your inquiries or assistance with retirement homes, seniors' residences, or downsizing, be my pleasure to help. Our services are completely free. Call me at Lianas Senior Transition Support at 514-622-8074 or lianasservices.com. And you could listen to Life Unrehearsed here on CJAD 800 every Saturday at 3 p.m.
Life Unrehearsed, brought to you by Flora-Lee Senior Residences. Always there for you. Safe, reassuring, and comforting. We call it home.